And we are live. Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to the 10th. It's the 10th, right?
11th.
11th. God damn. Okay, 11th episode. Fell in a handbasket. Jesus Christ, man. It's only been 11 episodes. I'm already this bad. What would happen in
Well,
future? I have
well, the
no
good news
freaking
is you
clue.
were only off by one. So, think of it that way.
Yeah, but I mean, relatively speaking, by the time we're at 100 episodes, I'll be off by 10. So that's not good. That's pretty bad. That's like
Well,
10%.
welcome everybody to number 11. Yeah,
That's
welcome
right.
everybody to number 11.
Yes. So,
And I guess what's the topic of conversation today? You want to jump right into Ukraine and Trump and this Trumpian chaos that he's been creating the last week or so?
yeah, talking about all the crazy stuff with Greenland and Canada and everything like this. Oh man, yeah, I don't know.
And
I kind of want to start
Mexico.
with Ukraine, but let's I guess let's start with that now that you kind of brought it up. I don't know what do you think about
Well,
the all
I
this
think it's
Trump
all
nonsense?
related. Well, it's all kind of tied in and it's all kind of related, because you got this guy coming in and like none of this is new, right? Like Trump did all this back in 2016. It's the same stuff, right? He wanted Greenland back then. He's been talking about, 51st state for that's like a Canadian joke and it has
But
been for decades.
people didn't take
Uh,
it seriously. Now people are
he
scared. Like Denmark is scared. Now Denmark is
Nah,
like,
nobody's taking
uh,
it seriously. Nah, this is just media spin. But no, nobody actually thinks that he's going to do any of this, right? But
okay.
and because he's done all this before, and none of it's new. Like the idea of invading Mexico is not new, right? Um, but what it does do, I think, is it puts everybody in this kind of bipolar. Oh, how are we going to deal with the crazy orange man? And it's like, well, the same way you did back in 2016, right? And I've been saying this a long
Yeah.
time, like, that the best indicator of future performance is past performance. Trump is not going to come in and make any wholesale changes from the way he governed back in 2016, right? So if people are thinking that there's going to be this big change in the rally against the deep state and all that stuff, it's not going to happen, right? The
Yeah, like
globalist powers are too big and too
Trump was
established, and Trump
president
is part of
once.
it.
He already
Well, and
was
he's
president
also part of
once.
it. He's also part of the
Exactly.
globalist
That's
powers,
that's my
right?
other part. That's my other point. So number one, he's already been president once, and number two, when he's on their side anyway, he's on your side, guys. Calm down. I think it's just like
Well, I mean,
literally he's not in kind of in the same way. Like they tried to maybe like crown Hillary, that was like her girl or something, and Donald Trump didn't kind of usurped her throne in a way. And maybe like they still had a little bit of that bitterness. I can't think of what else would make people. I mean, maybe if you don't get that he's trolling a lot of the time, but
well,
when it comes to
the thing about Trump is it's not necessarily that, if we want to call it the deep state, right? It's not that the deep state is so diametrically opposed to Donald Trump, the person, and his policies and all that stuff. They're not. The only reason why they would prefer a Hillary Clinton or a Kamala Harris or someone like that over a Trump is they can control the other people. The only reason they don't want Trump in power is he says the truth out loud for everybody to hear, right? Like he'll be the first one to come out and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to go into this country. We're going to, yeah, we overthrew that government. Yeah, we couped that guy." He'll come out
we
and
got
say
the
all this stuff.
oil.
Yeah, we're there for the oil, right? He'll say the stuff out loud that they don't want presidents to say out
Well, I
loud.
think also
And
he
that's
says
it.
it in such an unsophisticated way too. Like they have this whole language to
Sure.
justify and legitimate it. It's not like we're not there for
Well, yeah,
the oil. We're there because of, let's say you ask
freedom.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, yes, there's like
democracy.
probably a range. There's a range of people that are saying, "Oh, it's freedom and democracy," to people that are saying we're helping the Kurds or something, to people that are saying we're really concerned about um, our buddy Israel. So like, there's a range of
Sure.
available views that you can have, but
But that's the thing,
outside
like
of those views, go ahead.
yeah, he says the truth out loud, and that's uncomfortable because it's counter to the narrative that the US has been building up the last 60 years, right? Which is, capitalism, democracy, freedom loving, blah 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 versus authoritarian communism,
Hmm.
blah blah. Like
I
that's
think more
been the
than
narrative.
that, Nunya, I think more than that, it's also the fact that he's this America first uh start worrying more about building us up and making America great rather than overextending ourselves
Sure, sure.
and and I think that is also maybe that more than anything else to like these, let's say, unelected deep state bureaucrats who are of the opinion that it's their country, those guys. Um,
Well,
they
yeah, and I,
probably
I
hate
think it's a
that the
combo of the
most.
two.
That's the
It's
most. That's the thing they hate the most.
it's probably a combination of the two because like on the one hand, like you're right, they have this they had this whole narrative that America is the beacon of freedom and democracy.
I
They
don't
they
know,
don't even
Albright.
they don't even refer to America anymore as a country, right? Have you noticed that? It started with Obama, and all these politicians now, they don't even refer to America as a country anymore. They refer to it as the idea of America, right? Like the idea of America, freedom, democracy. Like it's such nonsense, but this is the narrative that they have crafted, as I said. So that's the one thing. Trump goes counter to their narrative. And then the other thing, yes, to your point, when he says America first, and we're going to tariff the hell out of you, and we're going to, bring our production back. Well, if you're an ally, you're like, well, okay, you're throwing us under the bus because you're threatening to tariff us now. And if you're an enemy, you're like, well, gee, that's just proof positive why we're an enemy of yours and why we need to diversify away, right? So,
Or if
if
you're
you're
already
Indonesia,
skeptical,
sure.
yeah,
Like if you're in Indonesia, for example, a couple of days
which
ago, they
just
were
joined
announced,
BRICS,
yeah,
which is nuts, crazy. BRICS is
right.
making
So,
moves.
well, if you're Indonesia, you're thinking, gee, what a great decision we made, right? Because now we've joined, this kind of block that is counter to these mad people who are threatening their neighbors, threatening to invade their neighbors, threatening to invade their allies. Uh, so if you're Indonesia, yeah,
Well, they
that's no
did a
place.
lot they undermined their own financial hegemony. They did a lot to fuck over their own system when they seized the Russian assets. And now that they're paying for the Ukraine war with Russian stolen assets, and Zelensky's trying to bribe politicians from other countries with Russia's stolen assets. They're probably paying themselves with Russia's stolen. Now that that's happening, they're going to think, it's going to be uh, uh, that's the way that they're going to be trying to fund it, and then they're going to just try to, I think, I don't know, eventually cut it off.
Well,
I forgot where I was going with that.
I think that this is we're going to see a rapid acceleration now of the end of NATO and subsequent to that the end of the EU. I think it'll all crumble sometime
Well,
within the
right.
next
Well,
20 years.
I don't know. Okay, 20 years, that's a more generous window than other people who talk about it, but just in general, the fact that a country like Indonesia will look at the fact that we stole those Russian assets and we're using them however we see fit, it's obviously corruption. They're going just having the ability to diversify already establishes a sort of checks and balances on the SWIFT system, on the dollar system. all of a sudden you can't get away with as much bullshit as you did before because, well, people are just gonna start using, you know, trading through bricks more. Um, and that also, in a way, unless we try to do the thing that we, how we've done in the past, where we really pressure you and we're like, no, it's all or nothing. But I mean, I think more countries are going to be in a position like Turkey and India, where they can do deals with both. They can, they can
Well,
have
and the other thing
military
about that
equipment from
too,
both. Go ahead.
well, the other thing about that too is I think like America's soft power is has just shriveled up, and even their hard power is shriveled up. So, you know, nobody's really afraid of them anymore. And you're
Well,
not
I think the
seeing,
hard power has been exposed to be not what we. All this talk
right,
about Russia as being exposed, actually, what it's really done is the Ukraine war has exposed us. Because
sure.
in the
And
best possible, best case scenario, if a fight where we would have had to fight the Russians like that, right? And the Russians didn't ever resort to any nukes, and they didn't even escalate to as hard of a fight as they could have done. And meanwhile, you have soldiers that are tenacious. Ben Hodges, who worked with Ukrainian soldiers, said these are the finest soldiers I've ever worked with. The finest. This is a general, in the U.S. Army, and these guys, we were able to sweep massive casualties under the bus. They pay these invalids in Ukraine now that are injured from the war, people that are like blind and have no arms and no legs. They pay them such a small sum that they are forced to try to seek out some kind of work in their condition. So, um, yeah, it's funny. Those people aren't seeing any of those funds. So, they're being thrown under the bus.
well,
And
and we saw this coming. We've been talking about this a long time. For anybody who's been paying attention, we knew that Ukraine was being set up as a proxy. So this is just, the follow through of that. And it's unfortunate for the Ukrainian people, but they must have known that this was going to come, you know.
well, it's like I feel like it's almost like their apathy. A large extent, it was their apathy that led to this outcome. Because the Nazi problem in Ukraine has been around for a long time. Even like from my personal experience, people that I know in Ukraine oftentimes were super casual about being straight up fascist, swastika. I like Scott Horton always says Hitler loving goose stepping Nazis. So like that was like accepted in that culture. It was like acceptable, and people were just like, okay, these guys are just like a little bit like LARPers. They're a little bit like weirdos, but they were the perfect uh people to arm and to give like like we did in the Middle East, find an extremist group, give them weapons, you know, pump them up, give them protection. Think about during the Maidan, I believe when the Georgians were escaping, it was like Georgian and Ukrainian snipers were running away from the cops. They went to like the Canadian embassy, something like that. They hit the Canadian embassy. Holy crap. You know? That's like so in your face. They don't even care. Well, meanwhile, Israel just bombs an embassy. So we just do whatever the fuck we want, you know? We don't like that there's
Well,
some guy there.
yeah, I think Ukraine is, like I said, it's unfortunate for them, but this was kind of the dance card that they signed up for. So, this will be their fate. So be it. I think Ukraine is not long for this world. I think now it'll be interesting to see as Trump comes into power. Let's talk a little bit about what we think will happen once Trump gets into power, specific to Ukraine and the rest of Europe. Now, the way I kind of look at it, all of these globalist governments are falling. Like they're just falling like dominoes. You look at Germany is going to fall. The AFD is going to win that, or they'll come in first anyway. Whether they can form a government is doubtful. But you look at Germany and you've got the AFD. You look at France and they can't keep a government in place for longer than 3 months. You look at Britain, same thing. You look at Austria, they can't form a government. You keep going on down the list. Anytime that there's an election, a globalist is now getting booted out. Canada, Trudeau, he's finished. So
Hmm.
I think Project WEF is on life
Still
support.
up for debate to see what's going to happen in Romania. I think Georgia probably is safe. Probably they made it. But Romania, I feel
Yeah,
like right
I
now,
mean the coup attempt in Georgia is over now. They survived it. They're finished.
you never
Uh,
know. Sometimes you let your
nah, it's
guard
done,
down,
man.
like Syria,
Nah, it's
you
done.
let your guard down. Or you think so? Okay,
Nah,
you probably they
nah.
raided the offices, so they.
Nah.
She's still.
You saw that you'll never hear from her again. She's
She
off in a
says,
think tank somewhere.
didn't she say something about still performing certain duties, certain presidential duties,
She
something like
doesn't.
that?
You'll
I
never
gotta.
hear from her again. She's finished. You'll never hear from her again. Um, she's done. Uh,
She's
Georgia's safe.
Yulia Tikhanovskaya.
Yeah. No, Georgia's safe. They survived it. And I followed those protests closely. They weren't really protests at all. Like, if you listen to the mainstream media, you wouldn't know that there were like these fantastic protests every night. Nothing could be further from the truth. Like, the tops that I saw was like the first couple days, you were
Mm-hmm.
maybe looking at 5,000 people, which 5,000 people is not that many. So
That's
there
quite.
was never, not
That's
really,
picture
not for a
worthy.
protest
You can get
to
pictures.
overthrow the. Yeah, but that's all they did, right? Like, there was no serious attempt to overthrow the government into
Yeah, if
basic
it had
control.
picked up from about, let's say, 5,000 or so, if it picked up from there, then it would have been a different story. The fact that it went on the decline says that they got it under control. Something that
Well, the
says
money
that our
ran out.
playbook is,
The
well, I
money
think
ran out.
not, I think more than just the money ran out. I think they also got it under um, like, okay, I think like a little bit of our playbook, even on the ground, like our tactical operations on the ground, maybe are getting a little bit old. Maybe like
Well,
some I
predictable.
could still
Yeah.
work in the Middle East or something, but in Europe it seems like it's got mixed results, you know? Like our track
Well,
record in Europe has not been good. We've failed.
it's
Okay, we
because they've
succeeded
seen
in
it.
Ukraine, but
No,
the
it's
only
because they've
reason we
seen it all
succeeded in
happen.
Ukraine, go
They've
ahead.
seen it all happen before, and that's why it's not succeeding now. They don't
Right.
want to be the next Ukraine, right?
And
So
that's what I'm saying.
that's
It
what I'm saying.
succeeded in Ukraine, and that's the last time that it succeeded anywhere. It fucked. They
Yeah.
mailed. Did not make it in Kazakhstan. Right? In Kazakhstan, it was a failure. Um, Azerbaijan and Armenia. That whole situation, I think, that was supposed to also inflame and get the Russians involved. That didn't do that. So I mean, even though Pashinyan is like obviously I don't know. He's leans towards NATO, but he almost necessarily has to like be part of Russia's, what is it, the CSTO or whatever. I don't
Nah,
remember.
man, Georgia's time for a proxy war was 2008. Like, they're
But
looking
see,
at
there you go.
Ukraine and
Georgia, you've
they're
already
like,
tried it. So Georgia already
yeah,
even had that experience, and they were like,
right,
nope, we already
yeah.
know.
They already know. So, like, there was never a serious attempt in Georgia. Like, reading the frigging New York Times or Politico or one of these things, you wouldn't know that it was this big, massive protest, and they simply didn't exist. And not only that, they were wildly peaceful. Like, there was the only type of violence I thought saw were some of these NGO guys throwing fireworks at the cops, and that was it. So, like, to your point, the NGO playbook is old, it's tired, it doesn't work anymore. People are have woken up to the coup game. That's number one. And then number two, and I think we talked about this last time, you've got the Chinas and the Russias of the world who are helping prop up these countries. Like, that's why Maduro in Venezuela is still in power, right? Like, because he's being supported by China and Russia. Like, nobody's gonna
Well, I
attempt any
think
sort of serious coup.
from my understanding, they also have they are well it's part of their education to understand a little bit how U.S. imperialism in
Sure.
The Latin Americas has worked. So a
But
lot
those
of these
arrests the
people
other
are,
day, right? They arrested like 150 mercenaries, right? How do you think they got that information? They got that
from the
information from the
populace.
Russians. No,
Oh,
from the Russians.
you think
Hell
it's
yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they're
Yeah.
popular. I think that Maduro is legit popular. I think that
No,
they're
he is.
circled the wagons
But
effect.
but the mercenaries that they rounded up, did you hear about that? A couple days ago, they arrested like
Yeah,
150
yeah.
who were planning to stage a coup. Americans, Ukrainians, the whole shot. Uh,
Man, that
and of
makes me so
course,
sketched out. I'm like, really? Is it
well,
really
of course,
Ukrainians and Americans? Everybody like how convenient.
well, and of course, the mainstream media doesn't mention anything about this
Of
because they were
course,
caught red-handed. But the only reason that Maduro had that information is he's being fed it, and this is what I mean when I say that they're being supported by the Russias and the Chinas of the world. Historically, these countries wouldn't get involved, right? China would never get involved in any of this stuff because it's completely out of their backyard. But now China's saying, "Hey, you need our help. We're here to help you." And so that's why ever since I'll call it the Putin Xi marriage of 2023, none of these coups have been successful. And I think that behind the scenes, it's largely due to the support they're getting from some of these big players, right? So I think that that's a definite factor there too. Number one, people know the coup playbook, and number two, uh, a lot of these countries that potentially could be in trouble are getting help from where historically they never would have. And that's a real problem for the NGOs because they're effectively ineffective now,
well, that
right?
is multipolarity right there. That's what that
Mhm.
is. And these people, the think tank racket, that mostly funded by um, the whole reason that these think tanks exist in the first place is because universities weren't saying the kinds of things that people who fund think tanks needed them to say. So, it's a lot of like defense contracting companies and things like that, and like groups that are political activist groups, right? The kinds like, you know, pro-Ukrainian nationalist types, right? It's not like we're going to allow the Russians to fund um, think tanks in America. Are you freaking kidding me? No way. That would be like foreign interference. But Israel can fund them, and Middle Eastern countries and Ukraine and all that. So you have those are like their funding sources. So this is who they serve, right? This is who they're going to skew the information in a way. They're going to even use framing in a way that makes sense from those perspectives.
Mm.
And you know, that's like once you read stuff that's already like in MSNBC and all this kind of um, CNN already, it's already been chewed over by think tankers like that. And these
Yeah.
guys end up advising senators and House representatives. So that's freaking crazy. That's nuts. And it completely skews a lot of their information and explains a lot of the crazy stuff that we're doing that is accelerating the downfall of the empire.
Well, Europe is in real trouble right now. And that's why when I was saying, like, I think we'll see the collapse of NATO and the EU within 20 years. You're right. Maybe 20 years is optimistic. Maybe it'll be less than that. But keep in mind, in the grand scheme of like world history, 20 years is nothing, right? But
Well, I mean, I'm going to say
I don't
that.
see the EU lasting at all. I think Germany will be the first to go. Right? Germany's just going to wash
What
their hands of
about
this.
what about NATO?
Same thing. Like, what's the point of NATO anymore? Right?
So if there
They
is
just got
no
destroyed by Russia. Like, what's the point? You know?
Well, if there is no NATO, then that would make the EU that much more important, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, let's ask ourselves. Like, if you're a European citizen or any citizen for that matter,
Hmm.
what would you rather have your government spend money on? a Patriot missile battery for $1 billion, or a subway line for 2 billion, right? So would you rather have two Patriot batteries, or would you rather have a new subway line in your
Well,
city?
they're not going to be given that choice. It's not
Right,
how
I
it's
get
going to
it.
work.
But more and more people are thinking that way, right? So, and particularly in countries like, you've kind of got this warped view of money being where you're from. And but the rest of us, we all live within budgets. And our governments will set out a budget every year, and we try to stay within that budget. I know, revolutionary, right? Um,
Seems
so
like
for a
that's an
lot of the,
impossible state of affairs. Can't be done.
it's impossibility, right? But for a lot of countries, we just don't have the money to buy weapons. End of story, right? So if you were to ask the average German, that Patriot battery versus a subway, they're all going to say, no, we need the subway. The subway is more valuable to us in our quality of life than a couple of destructive weapons. Most pragmatic people think that way, right? Now, you're right. Are we going to be given that option? I think that the politicians are going to be forced to give us that option. The public is just going to demand it. You're going to start seeing a lot of violence. You're already seeing it. Seeing it happen all over Europe, Germany in particular, and it's going to get worse as standards of living keep going down. People get more and more desperate, and I've always been saying that you mess with a person's standard of living, it's just as well you hop into bed with their wife, right? Like, people will have visceral reactions to this. It's already happening, man. And you're going to get a lot more desperate people out on the
But
streets
see,
protesting and doing violence.
but that alone doesn't mean like there were Ukrainians out in the streets protesting and doing violence because they were trying to protest for better living conditions as well, and that was hijacked to force them into a meat grinder where there's been about 1 million Ukrainian casualties, is the estimate that I keep hearing, and I believe it. People like Wyatt say, "Hey, man, like I've been following this war, and that sounds like a very plausible figure." Other analysts as well. Wyatt doesn't want to call himself an analyst, right? But so that it doesn't, just that alone doesn't say much. Like especially when so much of this stuff is infiltrated to heck. We've seen all the pictures on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter of um, obvious feds that pull up in a U-Haul truck and join your protest, and break a couple of windows, get everybody rounded up, put on some kind of terrorist watch list. Like this is so they're not taking it lying down, I guess is what I'm saying. They're still doing shit. Like look at what happened to the trucker protest in Canada. They fucking shut it down. They took people's
Yeah,
finances.
but there's a difference though. We're fed up now. Like, we weren't fed up 4 years ago. We're fed up now,
You think so?
right?
Okay.
I
Okay.
know so. I promise you, if the trucker protest was to happen now, and those cops were trying to protest against those truckers, there would be violence. Those cops would all get beaten and killed. End of story. Like I said, you're messing with people's standard of living. I'll give you a scary stat. In the United States, homelessness last year in 2024 increased by 18% year over year. Okay.
I believe it.
Of that eight, no, okay. You'll be surprised by this stat even more. Of that 18%, 40% were families. These are working people who are sleeping
Yeah.
in their cars with their kids because they cannot afford rent. Okay. This is how desperate it's getting. This wasn't this desperate back during the pandemic. This wasn't this, desperate even back during the Great Recession. What we're about to see is going to smack us like something we've never seen before. Okay. And we haven't seen in 100 years. It's going to be a depression.
It's gonna
So,
get worse, that's for sure. First thing it's
well,
gonna do is it's gonna probably because okay, Ukraine failed. and it's going to continue to fail. And we invested in it.
Mhm.
It didn't go the way we wanted to. Like, where were we able to make up some of that difference? Well, if you think about how Michael Hudson, economist, likes to say that the, the war in Ukraine is really America's war to keep Europe in its sphere of influence. So if you think of it like that, um, then, you know, even if you lose part of the Ukraine war, you still achieve some of your objectives. And where did they save the dollar? They saved it on now they have Europe hooked on this gas, this transit gas. They're gonna build that Qatari pipeline now, right? Through Syria to Turkey. There's gonna
I don't think
be,
so. Nah, that
I
won't
don't think
happen.
so. Okay.
It's too. I think it's too technically complicated. I was reading up on it.
Okay.
It just politically, it's just too much of a cluster. And why would the Qataris want to do it? Right? I guess. Like, here's the thing: the
Well,
pipeline would have to pass through four different countries, including Syria, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. Right? That's not going to happen. So, because you've got four countries who don't particularly get along with each other. And then the other thing that, this article that I was reading about it brought up was, why would the Qataris even want to do this now? Like, back when it was pitched, maybe. But now they're shipping everything directly to Europe via LNG. They're making tons of money, right? They have no reason to create a pipeline. So yeah, I think it's good for the press to write about and give the Europeans some hope, but
okay,
it will never happen.
let's say you're right. I've not seen this article, but maybe you're right. And the Qataris aren't going to build that pipeline. That Syria is too much of a mess. Okay, there's still going to be other winners and other ways in which the U.S. kind of got their way. Like we were able to cleave the Europeans off and finally give the Europeans energy independence from Russia, right? Ukraine's not transiting Russian gas now or whatever. So
For now, yeah,
trying to think
I think that'll
where
change
else?
too.
Where else
Well,
did we
I
get
think,
wins? We also got wins in Armenia, Azerbaijan. We got wins there as well. Um, we got wins in Finland and in Sweden. Those countries are now firmly in NATO, right? They were always kind of like, now they're definitely in NATO, you know.
yeah, I mean, adding two members to, a zombie organization, if that's a win, okay, great. Uh, I'll go back to, I don't see NATO being very long for this world because the whole point of it is kind of moot at this point, and it's just been defeated by Russia. So I think the bigger issue will be the EU, right? When I look at the EU and, you
Macron
know,
going down.
well,
Uh,
in time when times are good, yeah, great, everybody EU values. When now you're seeing times being bad, and you're starting to see the swords come out, right? And I've been saying this for years. The thing a European hates the most, other Europeans, and that's what
mhm.
you're seeing. They've always have, always will. They won't get along. The whole notion of the EU was a stupid idea from the start, and now that the I'll, I'll go back to the idea of America. The idea of the EU, now that the idea of the EU is not to the benefit of some of the main players, particularly Germany, yeah, man, I could see Germany leaving the EU. Like, that's what the AFD is running on, right? And they're in the lead right now. So what does that tell you? Eventually, at some point, Germany will leave the EU, and once that happens, the whole house of cards collapses. So, what will that happen in 10 years, 20 years? I don't know. It'll happen in our lifetime. I'm sure of that.
Well, probably Germany won't be first if it does start happening like that. I'm guessing it'd probably be maybe somewhat of a cascading effect. But yeah, it's in a way I could see the EU going down before NATO because um, number one, the Americans are much more invested and involved in keeping their footprint in Europe. That's NATO is that. NATO is their baby. They run NATO, they're in charge of it, and it's part of the way we fund our military industrial complex, and in a time when we need to fund it even more, in a time when it's more important, because we realize our
Well,
flaws, weaknesses,
here's my
and
thought on that though. If I'm European, right? I'm looking at NATO and I'm saying, why do we need any of this? Like, we're not like Russia's not going to invade us. Like most pragmatic Europeans know that, right? The only people who are running around like chickens with their heads cut off are the globalists who have a vested interest. The average European, they welcome the Russians as members of the European community. Like they don't think that Russia's going to invade them. So then
mm, I think there's
if
a
you
lot
get
of
past if
Russophobia,
you
and
get past
especially
but if you get past that rhetoric, I actually don't think there's a lot of Russophobia. I don't believe that. I
in
think
Europe.
that there's a lot of, no, I think there's a lot of Russophobia in the media. I think that, but the average person, no. I think that and I'm just going by, and this is dated, right? Because it's been a while since I lived there. But when I lived in Europe, no. You know who people hated in Europe? The Poles. People in Western Europe, when I lived there, they all fucking hated the Poles. Nobody ever mentioned anything about the Russians,
They hate each
right?
other, that's for sure. But I think they have a
Right.
collective, they can come all around their collective hatred of Russia, I think. I
Well,
still
I
think that
think
they have a little
Europeans,
bit of,
I go back to Europeans hate each other. It comes from thousands of years of living next to each other, cultural differences, language differences. It's like one big dysfunctional family. You could be, so most Europeans, I wouldn't say that they hate each other, they're just annoyed with one another. But like I said, they're one big dysfunctional family. It is what it is. It seems to work, right? So
mm,
I don't
yeah, I
see
think it
where,
works, but NATO's there. The Americans are there to keep watch over them and stuff. I think
not really. No,
that's
this
part of
predated
their
NATO.
appeal.
Nah,
I think
man,
it's
this predated NATO. Like
yes, okay.
they've been like this for hundreds of years.
They've
The
been fighting each other for hundreds of years. Yes, but I get that, and there's been famous examples and stuff. The Brits are fighting the French, and they all fight the Germans and all this stuff. So that's been their history since NATO. There have been wars in Europe, but it's been
sure,
NATO's wars. It's been NATO attacking Yugoslavia. It's been NATO
right.
getting the Ukrainians to attack, the Russians, the
So
Donbass.
I don't see any evidence to suggest that NATO has brought any sort of peace and security to Europe. I don't see any evidence of that at all.
But
You know,
you
I see
think
none,
so? I think that
none.
even if
It's quite
even
the
if you're
opposite. They
right,
brought the Ukraine war and they brought the Yugoslavia war. That's two in its 70-year history,
yeah, but
right?
the French don't care about the freaking Serbs, about freaking
No, but
Bosnians.
that's just those two, and forget about the wars that they created that weren't in Europe. So, like the whole idea that NATO has created peace in Europe, people see through that. And like I said, so if I'm the average European, I'd be like, you know what? I'd rather my tax dollars go towards healthcare. I'd rather my tax dollars go towards infrastructure, education, fucking blow up
Well, the
dolls,
reason
whatever it
why
may
they can
be.
afford that in countries like Germany and stuff is because they outsource a lot of their defense spending to the Americans, and therefore
Yeah,
they
but you're
have a
missing my
lot.
point. You're missing my point. What I'm saying is they don't need defense spending, right? Why do we need defense spending? Because America says so. There's lots of countries that have no military, right? And they seem to get along just fine. If Europe just said tomorrow, like if Germany said tomorrow, you know what, we're going to take our chances that nobody's going to invade us, and we're going to put our military spending down to the bare minimum of like a coast guard or something, wouldn't matter, right? People would be like, okay, great, take all that extra money, put it into healthcare or wherever. And Germany would be better off for it. That's my point. If people just woke up to the fact that the only people trying to sell tools of war are the warmongers, then the whole thing collapses, right? You don't need NATO, is my point, right? The only reason we
Uh,
need NATO is because the warmonger says we need NATO, but we don't actually need NATO.
what I think is different mechanisms can be, developed to handle a lot of these issues. You know, sure, NATO
Sure.
plays certain roles that can be argued are important in Europe, but I mean, if these functions are so vital and so important, wouldn't another they be taken up in another way by somebody else in some fashion, right? And
Sure.
it should be up to the Europeans to decide these things, but once again, it negates the point, right? It completely uh thinking that way, I feel like misses out on one of the reasons why we're interested on keeping NATO going, and that is because it's our baby. So
Yes.
that is why okay, as much influence as we have, as we can muster, which is going to be substantial in Europe in the upcoming decade, because we're
Eh,
going to be their supplier of all this stuff. We're going to be the kingmakers, probably the economy wreckers. And so,
only if the Europeans let you. So if that's what I'm saying. If I'm the Europeans, I put my foot down and say, you know what, this isn't working for us anymore. We're going to go out on our own. We're going to review our own national policies around whether or not we want to be in NATO. Like I'm just saying, if I was a German, right? If I was the Uberführer of Germany, I'd be
mhm.
like, we're gonna look and see if NATO's working for us anymore. We're gonna look at see if this relationship with U.S. bases in our territory is in our best interest anymore. We're gonna look at the EU and see if that's in our best interest anymore. And if they're not, we're going to pull out of all of them. And then if they did that, the United States couldn't do anything, right? They could wag their finger, threaten economic sanctions, do all that stuff. Okay, great. Well, then all that means is that Germany just moves over to the BRICS camp. And that's the thing. Like, this is what I said at the very beginning. The US's soft and hard power of both kind of, the emperor's got no clothes, man. You know, that's it. Game over. So, but
Well, I mean,
it comes
I,
down to countries having spines and standing up and saying, no, we're not going along with this. Right. You know, it's
well, I,
unfortunate that Mexico has got more of a spine than Canada, but they say the woman in Mexico has got more of a spine than Trudeau. But it is what it is.
well, in a lot of these situations, okay, Trudeau is just, Trudeau. Everybody hates him. Trudeau hates Trudeau. But when it comes to, you know, these other countries, a lot of the times, I feel like they have them between a rock and a hard place. There's not that much that they can do. Yeah, if you have somebody like Macron in there, they have also an ego, and they themselves are probably on board with your stuff. He was like a banker and stuff before, so he's probably very much enthusiastic about finance capitalism and stuff of that nature, neoliberalism stuff. Um, but when it comes to uh, these other countries, I think they just have them in a place where they can't say no. Kind of like take the money or suffer the consequences. Join the corruption or you are screwed. I think we have people over that barrel, and
Well,
that's
but
part of the reason. Maybe we can't
the
do Europe. Maybe if
the
you're in
thing
Europe,
the
your
thing
options
about
are
it is
limited.
though, the over the barrel crowd, they've now gone ahead and formed their own club, and their own club is bigger than our club. That's what they've done.
Some
So
of them, not all of them. See, yeah, the Russians, the Chinese, a lot of countries, the Indonesian now, right? Uh, but not
it'll be
in
all of them
Europe.
eventually.
If
Well,
we
in
can
Europe,
keep
but with
Europe,
Europe won't matter though. That's the thing, right? All the growth is coming from the rest of the world, not in Europe. Like Europe is what is in Europe. We had this discussion before. It's a barren land of nothingness, of friggin' baguettes and sauce. But other than that, like they don't actually build anything anymore.
we'll
They
get our
don't dig
money.
anything out of the ground.
We'll
They
get our
don't
money.
do anything.
We'll find a way
Uh,
to get our money.
I don't think so. I long term, I don't think so because the Europeans won't have it to give, and that's the problem, right?
We'll
You
privatize
see what
everything. Everything will be privatized. Everything will be a private public partnership. It'll be uh, citizens are going to be forced to bear the brunt of the costs and all of the profits and benefits of the public infrastructure is going to go to a relative small few of
okay, sure, and everybody will just end up cutting the leadership's heads off. That's what'll end up happening.
oh, it's not
It will
not a thing
be
up to do with
revolution.
the leadership. It's private. What are you gonna do?
Okay, well, they'll all get killed too. People will revolt. That's what will happen. It's happening now. You're seeing it happening in Europe now, and it hasn't even gotten bad yet, right? Wait till it gets bad. You're going to see people revolting. You're going to see people violently killing other people. It will happen because, like I said, you mess with somebody's standard of living, it psychologically messes them up, right? Like I said, 40% more people have to, can you imagine being a parent and having to put your kid to bed in the back seat of your car, right?
Yeah, I've
If that
seen
was
it, dude.
me, if that
I've
was me
seen.
and I saw Lindsey fucking Graham or some piece of shit like that walking down the street, yeah, I'd Luigi that motherfucker in a heartbeat. And you're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see a lot more of that.
We
A
don't condone
lot more of
violence.
that.
That was a joke, but yes, still.
No, this is, it's not about condoning violence, it's about telling you what's going to happen, right? You're going to see a lot
Yeah.
more violence. This is what happens when you mess with people's standard of living. And I keep saying this. And that's why you can think that we're gonna bully the Europeans. No, you won't, because they're eventually going to get to the point where the enablers are all going to get wiped out. They're all going to get wiped out. There's more of the 99% than there are the one. And it's just a matter of time. And you can see, you can feel it bubbling everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. I certainly see it where I am. You certainly see it down in the States, don't you? You certainly see it in
Yeah.
Europe,
I don't
right? There's
share your what I would consider kind of almost wild optimism about the public consciousness growing to a critical mass boiling point. If that's going on, uh I mean, I do feel some of it, but I don't see it on that scale at all because I think that people are just realizing that, hey, we are being lied to and propagandized as well. And now it's only okay to start being like, well, maybe it's time for Ukraine to start making peace,
right.
That's
But there's
all
a
that's
difference
all as
though.
far as they're going.
There's a difference though. You're out in the middle of nowhere, right? You live out in the farm. Go to any big city, right? Go to any big city and you'll see it. It'll become very apparent to you as soon as you walk out of the train station, out of the airport, however you're coming from. Go to any major big city in the US, Canada, Europe, and try to I go somewhere that you've been before, right? Like, where have you been to New York? Have you been to Chicago before? Go to Chicago and try to compare your prior experience to what you're seeing now. And once you do that, you'll be like, wow, this is dramatically different. Like, I can see what Nunya was talking about. Like, this has got a really bad vibe. I'm seeing all sorts of homelessness like I've never seen before.
Well,
There's
we just
tents
know
pitched
there
up
is.
everywhere.
Yeah.
No, but if you live in a big city, you see the violence every day, man. You see the
Mhm.
craziness every day, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, worse and worse.
Dude, it's
Um,
crazy. Have you seen those in Canada they have these now uh vending machines that give out free paraphernalia?
it doesn't surprise me because, like, that's the kind of silly-headed stuff that the Canadian government comes up with, help drug addicts with their drug paraphernalia, right? Because, like, this is somehow a fucking priority when
Yeah,
like I said,
free drug paraphernalia.
homelessness increases by 20%. And
Well, that's the
you
thing.
cannot walk by a
It's
green space without finding a tent these days. Um,
it's cheaper to pick up the corpses of people that have overdosed on fentanyl and get rid of them that way than it is to feed and clothe and house them and stuff. Like educate them. And then people love to throw up these examples of like, here's like a crazy old man who has been homeless for the last 60 years of his life. Look at this. We put him up into a room in a hotel or something, and within a week he turned it into a dump, or something. And
and
like people get latch
I
onto these
don't.
examples. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to sound like Chicken Little saying that the sky's falling and everything's, but I'm telling you, I have the changes I've seen where I am have been dramatic, and they've been rapid. That's what I can't get over, is how rapidly everything has declined. And that's what I'm saying. Like, and
Yeah.
things haven't even gotten bad yet. And that's what I'm
Really,
saying.
they've
You're gonna see,
accelerated since COVID, I think.
yes.
You really feel
And
the
like I said,
difference.
things haven't even gotten bad yet. We're gonna start to see things get really bad this year. Like we're gonna get into a recession this year, and I think that's gonna turn into a depression. I really do. And because I don't think people realize how much bad debt all these banks have on their balance sheets. Number one, and also I don't think people realize how screwed the U.S. is with respect to de-dollarization.
Hmm.
And
Americans
all
don't
this,
realize.
all this money printing that we talk about, right? uh, that's ending pretty quickly. I mean, geez, just today the 30-year Treasury yields hit 5%. Um, what do you do with that? 5% is kind of seen as being the, oh my God, that's a crazy high yield for a bond
Hmm.
amount, but it's kind of the norm now. So as fewer countries buy these dollars, and why would you? All that
Well,
means that the yields go
if
up,
you
and all that means
manage
the
it,
interest payments go up.
think about this. I mean, okay, I don't want to say that they're playing 5D chess because they've demonstrated that they're doing anything but that, our quote unquote leadership. But I mean, if you were, then you would see that you have some cards in your deck. You managed to sever Europe's and Russia's relationship. You managed to cleave away Eastern European countries with significant Russian populations where they're committing human rights violations in broad daylight and nobody cares. They're oppressing their own people because it's Russians. You managed to cement those, like I said, Finland
Sure.
and Sweden. If you want to get rid, I'm sure the Americans care a lot less about the EU than NATO. You, if you're prepared to throw the EU under the bus, um, for but keep NATO going, uh, I think that there's a lot that the Americans can still do to keep the dollar uh, not catastrophically destroyed. It's like they can't, if they play it smart, you know, there's still some things they can do. The problem is they have not been playing it smart. There's a failure and we double down on our failure. That is insane behavior. Like it's the Ukraine war is not going our way. Obviously, we will only continue to lose more. Now the Russians are even saying, well, it was maybe a couple weeks ago, Putin was saying, well, about negotiations, yeah, we're not interested in a ceasefire. So people are like, whoa, before the Russians were like, negotiations, negotiations. Now the Russians are like, well, um, so they understand that they have the cards. Maybe Donald Trump did not understand the full extent of the problem that's developing in Ukraine, but he must, at this point in time, already be getting up to speed and understanding that, oh, it is pretty bad. There's only so much we can do. They admitted that during that long period, remember, they were like, oh, we can't pass funding for the house. If only we could pass funding for the house, we could save all of these Ukrainian lives with additional equipment. They admitted that that was just basically a play. That was a farce. they didn't have the shit in stock in reserve, and so they actually did this whole rigmarole thing in the media, um, so they could replenish some of their own stuff, because it's that bad. So Trump must be getting up to speed on that. So
Yeah, I'd imagine he knows what's going on there. But it's one of those things where, he's said multiple times, like, we never should have gotten into this and blah, blah, blah. He can say that. And I hope he's right about that, he is sincere. But then on the other side, I'm sure like Trump is very easily manipulated, right? Basically, whoever comes to him last will get his okay, right? So he can be easily talked into continuing to fund the war. Now,
or not even talk to. Let's just be very generous to Trump supporters and say he could even just be pressured and maneuvered into doing it like he did before, where he had no ability to, since he was such a Russia agent and a Putin puppet, couldn't really do anything but continue to arm and escalate with Ukraine.
well, my guess is what'll happen. It'll be something along the lines of, the Trump team will say to the Europeans, "We're out. We can't fund this anymore. We're not going to. We're not even going to bother because it won't get through the House anyway. But what we expect are you, vassal states, to pick up the slack. And like you were saying earlier, we expect you to fucking kill your kids and whatnot for our benefit." Now, the Europeans, obviously, they're going to, say, yeah, that's not going to happen. And that'll probably be the end of it, right? They'll then figure out a way to somehow get out of this thing. Now, how they're going to get out of this thing, your guess is as good as mine. Because, if I'm Russia at this point, if I'm Putin, I'd say the four oblasts that we already have are now ours. Crimea is now ours. We're also going to take Mykolaiv and Odessa and Kharkiv and
Well,
Sumy.
we're doubling down, it
And
seems, right now. But I think we're doubling down because number one, we don't know what else to do. Number two, they want it to collapse it on Trump's watch. Zelensky
sure.
said that the war has to end in 2025. That he said that, so that's big. It says a lot. And
Well,
he's also
obviously, they're
on the Lex Friedman podcast. He was also saying that, oh yeah, we're gonna have to think about how we can give up these territories for now, and then continue to achieve our goals through diplomatic means. What
yeah.
that's code word for we have to make a deal.
Well, Zelensky just says what Zelensky says. I don't think it really matters. Like at the end of the day, it'll be Trump who agrees to the deal. And I think if I'm Putin, that's what I'd ask for. I would just say we're taking everything up to the river. We're taking Odessa. We're linking up to Transnistria. And you either agree to that, you also agree no NATO membership for Ukraine, and whatever else Putin had put in that package. And I would say, this is what we expect. Either sign it now or we'll just keep going until we take it militarily. Choice is yours. And, see what Trump says. And I think Trump would probably agree to it. Like, Trump doesn't care. Like, Trump, like, fuck, I didn't want to be involved in this anyway.
You're
So,
gonna
I don't
spin
know.
it.
I think that plan A for the Americans will be pass on everything that we can to the Europeans, but they're going to find that the Europeans are going to say no. And the Europeans are going to say, well, unfortunately, we don't have anything to give. And we need to come to a negotiated settlement. That's how this thing will end.
See, if that happens, then I could see that really accelerating the fall apart of the EU. Maybe, I mean,
Well, yeah, hmm
I
I
could
think
see it
so.
happening kind of soon then.
Well,
Um,
NATO, obviously, NATO will collapse. And the EU, you got to believe that's not far behind because, if I'm Germany, my God, I'd be running on one thing,
so
right?
you
If I'm a
think NATO
German
first?
politician, oh yeah, NATO's done. But if I'm a German politician, I'd be running on one thing. I will restart Nord Stream, and I'd get elected. because everybody in Germany is looking at their gas bills. Apparently, it's a real problem. Like, I was looking at some bills online and people showing like, their bill from like 2 years ago versus now, and it's just friggin' crazy, right? So, yeah, if you were a politician in Germany, you could run on that one issue and win. I'm pretty confident of that. So, yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before countries start to splinter off because the EU hasn't worked for a long time. The EU's never worked well, right? When has the EU really ever worked, right? It's never
It's
really worked
worked
well.
to screw over Greece and bail out
Yeah,
Germany.
right, right.
So, I
So,
mean, somebody wins from that.
right.
Germany,
The,
Italy, France.
well, Germany, it was established to benefit Germany and France to the detriment of everybody else, pretty much. And,
Yeah, but the
it's,
key
it's
important thing to remember why, for example, Ukrainians wanted to join it is also because of other, oh my God, cat, you can't type. No, no, do not. Um, wanted to have that free movement between Ukraine and Europe. And if you're kind of in a corrupt little tin pot country, that's really useful for you. You can definitely sell more of the people's stuff to these people,
you could sell all those HIMARS systems all over
Yeah.
Europe.
Think about this. You're not, instead of getting a, what is it, the opposite of a monopoly is a, fuck, what is it? When the purchaser has the monopoly, it's the monopoly on the buyer. Can't remember now, but it's like that. Monopsony, I think. It's a monopsony. I have to Google that. I don't remember. But yeah, so they that's probably the goal that they have, and it's up for debate, I guess, how effective their counter protesting measures are going to be. We can see that the Russian, okay, yeah, it's failed in Russia and Kazakhstan and Belarus, but those were kind of different movements. Those were artificial movements that were pumped up, and um, the playbook has kind of been a little bit, like you were saying, stale. But this, if it does happen, it will be very organic. It'll be coming from a place of even non-political people are going to be politically involved because they're hungry.
Well,
What
that's
did
how the French Revolution started, right?
what
Right.
did
That
Lenin
was
say that I think it was Lenin that said uh, every civilization is 2 meals away from revolution,
yeah.
something like that.
French Revolution started because people couldn't afford bread. It was that simple, and that's why I keep saying you mess with somebody's standard of living, it psychologically messes them up, and it messes you up, man. And particularly the more well off you are, I think. Like if you're poor and you're just a little less poor, you probably don't notice. But if you're like, doing well, and all of a sudden, or by well, I
You
mean
go
you can
from
actually afford bread.
millionaire to just a
Oh,
well-to-do.
no, I don't mean that. I mean like if you can afford to pay your rent and afford to pay your bills, and you're not living high on the hog, but you're getting by, and then all of a sudden you can't get by and you end up in your car. At
hmm
that, you become a raging lunatic pretty
There's
quickly.
always been some of those people, but it's at some point in time it's too many. And the America's had a homeless crisis for a long time. So yeah, at some point I think
Well, when
that
I saw
the way we're going,
18% year over year, that's incredible, right?
yeah.
That's a pandemic, right? That's a pandemic. That's an epidemic in itself.
Well, yeah, it's a
And
homeless crisis. It's a crisis.
yeah,
There's a homeless
eh,
student crisis. There's a homeless veteran crisis. There's a homeless
families.
family crisis. And these are all crises. So
But
it's
but
just not even spoken.
these are all just symptoms of a bigger problem, right? Which is the cost of living crisis, right?
Right.
Uh,
Well, the rent
so
is too damn high. That's why I always say the rent is too damn high.
and that's what I'm
Everybody,
saying. If you
everybody
can
can agree on that.
afford, if you got a roof over your head one day, and the next you've got like a sunroof from your car. Oh man, like, and you got kids. Oh, that breaks my heart. That absolutely breaks my heart.
Mhm.
You're going to see violence. That's what I'm saying. And we haven't. It hasn't started yet. Not really, right? Like the very poorest people of our society, they're feeling it, but that you're going to eventually get to the point where it's hit critical mass, where it can't be hidden anymore, and where everybody's complaining about it, and when people are starting to organize rallies and protests around it. And once that happens, it won't be able to be stopped,
It's
right?
already
It'll
coalescing around certain political issues, right? It's already
right.
coalescing around the Ukraine war. That's a big,
Yeah.
big, big one,
Oh,
especially in Europe.
but you ain't seeing nothing yet. Forget about Ukraine, forget about Palestine, all that shit. These are issues which are niche issues to particular sets. Once you get a
Mhm.
cost of living, everybody's going to come out, buddy. Everybody, just watch, right? And
Right.
and that's what the globalists don't want. That's what these rich Wall Street cocksuckers don't want. Because remember, Occupy Wall Street.
Mhm.
This will be Occupy Wall Street on steroids. And if it happens the way I can kind of see it playing out, oh, the last thing they want is for all of us to organize around the cost of living, because then all of a sudden all the other wedge issues don't matter, right? I don't care that the guy that I'm protesting next to me is black or gay or anything else or trans or whatever else kind of wedge issue that they want. The fact that we're protesting together because we're both broke and we're both hungry, oh, that's a very powerful force. And that's what they don't want. They don't want people, men, women, gay, straight, black, white. They don't want us coming together and organizing around stuff that actually matters, right? The
Right,
cost of
right,
living,
right.
like once that happens, oh, buddy, that's a very, very, very scary beast.
Yeah. So far, they've managed to keep it divided along social lines, and like we always talk about, like you love to point out,
Yeah,
the false dichotomy between left and right. They managed to keep that more or less still going, but it is going off the rails because
it's
more and
going
more
off the
people,
rails and quickly,
yeah,
right?
more and more people can
People
see.
don't, people can see. They don't talk left, right. You don't hear left, right anymore, right? Not as much. People see through that now. They see through the wedge issues. They see through the wokeness. They see through all this other stuff. And this kind of like, if you're still talking about this stuff in 2025, you've missed the plot. Like you're 2 years behind everybody else. Like if you're still talking about woke issues in 2025, read, because you've missed the plot. It's not
Well,
relevant anymore. It's
it'll still
irrelevant
be,
bullshit.
it'll always get hits. It'll always be popular. It'll always be
Not really.
algorithmically.
It's people who are talking about that now. Uh, they're going to be marginalized very quickly because nobody wants to hear that anymore.
Listen,
We've all moved on. No, we've all
even
moved
during,
on to the real issues. The real issue is cost of living, right? It's not this other horseshit,
I
right?
agree with
The
you. I
real
agree with you.
issue is
All I'm
cost of
saying
living.
all I'm saying is that it's a one of those issues that will continue to be displayed and played around. Like they can make the lives of celebrities important and relevant. They can make anything important and relevant. So yeah, it's going to be like people are still going to talk about the left and right dichotomy and the horse race between Republican and Democrat. They're still going to push that, and to some extent, it's still going to have sway and hold and it frame the way that these issues are talked about. But like you said, and I agree with you, more and more people are, even if they don't understand what it is, they can't put their finger on it. They know it's BS. They know, at least they know
Yeah,
that much.
I agree with you to a point. I think that they'll still try to push it, yes, but what and I think that they did try to keep pushing it, but what they realized really quickly after Trump won is that the entire population had turned the page, poop, like turning off a TV.
Mhm.
And what they found really quickly was nobody was reading those articles anymore. Nobody was watching those clips. And now you never hear about it. Like, buddy, I'm a news hound, like you wouldn't believe. You never hear articles about woke anymore. You never hear articles about race. You never hear any of this
Right.
gender. Like, you don't hear any of this stuff
But
anymore.
Nanya,
It,
it's an issue like abortion. It's an issue that they can pull out when they need to. Like, think about the Kamala Harris versus Trump election. They just like when the conservatives needed to pull their base out, and there are people out there that are single issue voters on abortion. That is the election in which the rhetoric about saving babies and killing
sure, sure.
children. That
And
every
Trump
other
won.
election, it doesn't. Yeah, exactly right. It's a very important point. But every other election, right? They don't bring that up. It's not like it's an issue that this person just happens to deeply care about. All of a sudden, this is the season. Tis the season to care about election. This election season, last election season when I won, we did not talk about this. We talked about other stuff. Why? Because it's just like a red meat to the hound or whatever. Get people to come to your side. Just like people. But you like you said, just to your point before I finish up, the Democrats did try to pull this on their base with women's rights are being taken away, and it did not work.
Yeah, and that's my point. None of this works anymore because people don't buy it anymore. Like we're past the point of these kind of social issue, wedge issue politics because the real issues, the issues that affect our lives directly, are much more important, right? I'm not saying like there's always going to be a crowd who have like some sort of vested interest in woke, whatever the fuck that is, like because they're mentally ill people who support woke, right? Yeah, you'll find people like that. The same way you're going to find the odd hippie from the '60s still floating around, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the population, we do not care about this. We've made that known, and you're never going to hear about it again. And that's why you're seeing all these companies, they're moving away. Like BlackRock just yesterday, they announced that they were moving away from their climate change initiatives and all these ESR initiatives, all these DEI initiatives. Corporations have gotten the memo. Nobody's interested in this, and they're moving away from it all en masse. And that's why I'm saying you're just not going to hear about it anymore because the media just won't write about it. Now, will they potentially park it to your point and bring it out later on? Maybe, but
Always.
I think trans rights was a dead issue from the start, right? Nobody cared about it from the very start. So if we're going to compare like abortion versus whether or not some child can get disfigured, well, very different issues, right? I agree with you. They can pull out the abortion issue if they need to. They're never going to be able to pull out the trans issue because it was a loser from the start. And they
Mm-hmm.
realized that with the whole McIlvania thing with the Bud Light. That's when they realized, oh, we got a problem. It was that Bud Light dude. And once that blew up, that's when they started saying, oh crap, all these last 5 years that we've devoted to this, it's coming back to bite us in the ass. So yes, I agree with you. They could potentially use these wedge issues, but they won't be
Yeah.
using these wedge issues because none of these wedge issues were winners, right? And we all see through it now, right? You're not going
Maybe
to
that
find
I agree
a
that with
black
you that it'll
person
be.
who's right, but you're
I
not going to find a black person who's saying, "Oh my God, I'm hard done by the white man." Blah. Like they're past
Yeah,
that.
you
We're all
are.
past that. Nah, you're not. Not really. Nah, majority of black people don't think that way.
I've run into some. Yeah, I'd say the majority. Yeah, I'd say it's probably a vocal though minority. Um.
But still, a vocal minority that fewer people are listening to. Like nobody's listening to Al Sharpton anymore, right? He's not. He's nothing, right?
Al Sharpton
He's
and Colonel, not Colonel, geez, well,
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter his name. See, you don't even know his name. That's how
brother,
relevant he
the
is.
brother guy with the freaking afro. What's his name? Oh
Don't
my
know.
gosh, ran for president.
Couldn't tell you.
Oh my gosh, I
Cornell
can't remember
West.
now. Yeah, face.
Cornell
Yeah,
West.
Cornel West.
Yeah.
He's
And
lost so much credibility. He's
But
more
that's the
washed
thing,
up
like,
than Bernie now.
but that's the thing, like, this is what I'm saying. All these kind of social issues around race and women and men and gender and all, they're not important to people. We have real problems, right? And, you know, we care about the cost of living. We care about healthcare. We care about education. We care about not having lead in our drinking water. We care about things like
Mhm.
that actually directly affect us. All this other stuff, I think the majority of people have kind of woken up to the fact that we're all being played by the mainstream media. And the biggest loser in all of this, I think, is the mainstream media. Nobody's listening to the MSM anymore.
Well, the
It,
biggest loser is
it's
us, but yeah, I think that
yeah.
in
Okay,
general.
fair. Yeah.
Um,
But I think like you're seeing a massive kind of shift where stuff like YouTube, like we're on now, or X or whatever, this is the media right now. I don't think Elon Musk was wrong when he said that. And I
they'll
think
try
the
to put.
next several years we're going to be navigating what this looks like. But
Yeah.
yeah, mainstream media is finished, dude. They're done. Stick a fork in them.
Oh, I that's not the way I see it. I think they'll have a way to legitimize them and fund them even if they make no money. You're gonna need to be able to point to
Oh,
somebody
they'll
and
do that.
Human Rights
Sure.
Watch said this, you know?
Yeah, no, they'll keep doing that, but the point is nobody cares, right? Nobody cares what the New York Times says anymore. Nobody cares about the Washington Post. If they post anything, nobody believes it. X is where everybody goes now for their news, right? If you read something, even if you read it on New York Times or WAPO, first place you go is where? X or Telegram, because you actually
Yeah.
want to you want to see that video with your own eyes. You want to read that interview. You want to actually get what other people are saying about it, because you don't believe the Times, you don't believe the Post, you don't believe CNN.
Yeah, like that Don
So
Lemon, like that famous
yeah,
Don Lemon clip. But
yeah, so like the only people who are following this stuff now, like CNN and all that, old people, boomers. That's it. People who still have cable.
let's see.
That's it. So
Well,
like they can do their narratives, and they can, well, according to CNN, who CNN? What's that? That's whatever.
well,
Is
yeah,
that
speaking of
Cooper guy? That the guy who does the New York Times thing with?
yeah,
Oh yeah, those guys are funny.
with the
Haha.
white hair.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting bitten in the ass, I think we should move on to our next segment, the two scoops of crazy. So, in
Sure,
different, I
man.
guess to set this up, different people have different interests, and even in harsh economic times, it is important to some to have some sort of, snake repellent. So, for any snake repellent enthusiasts out there, or maybe like hikers or mountain bikers, this gentleman on the internet would like to share his discovery.
This
Let's
chicken
see.
shit. Look at that. Bite me. Bite me. This damn snake won't bite me. You know why? Because I got the best moonshine around. This bitch is too scared to bite me. Look at him. Bite me, boy. Bite me.
Oh my gosh, dude. That can't be more. I don't even
That'll
know.
be
Like, that looks
that'll
like it's
that'll
from a
be Vaughn.
movie.
That's Vaughn in like 10 years.
This looks like it's from a movie. It doesn't look real. It looks so fake. It's like way more wild than even the freaking crazy Russian guy in what was it? The Vacationer, who was trying to beat up all the cops. This guy's even crazier than that. I don't know what kind of snake that is. I don't know anything about that, but I mean, I don't know.
Mm,
I don't think this is an act. I think this guy's really drunk off his ass on moonshine, and
yeah,
he's super excited. I think so. I believe it. I'm calling kind of gullible, I guess. But I mean,
you
look
ever
at
have
him.
moonshine?
I've never like gotten off my ass drunk on moonshine. I've like taken a shot of moonshine before, like probably more than once, but never drank it a lot. I don't drink a lot of hard liquor in general.
Yeah, I don't drink anymore at all. But back when I was a kid, we used to call it jungle juice.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, dude, you can definitely get crazy. People can get wild and loopy. But yeah, dude, I mean, where the hell did he, first of all, where did he get this snake? Does he just have a snake sitting around? Was he like out
Oh,
there in the field getting drunk off his ass, and then he sees this snake and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna stare down." It's gonna be like mano a mano, man versus the wild moment. He picks it up, and the snake is like, "Oh my god, this guy smells like body odor, vomit, piss, and moonshine. There's no way I'm going. I'm literally passing out from the smell alone." This guy's like, "I've discovered a miracle." Or maybe, like I was saying earlier in our introduction, maybe he was just like a snake repellent enthusiast, and he's just been looking around for the right moonshine. Because notice he says why he won't bite him, because he's got the best damn moonshine around. I think that's an important detail. So
well, we
because he's
thank him.
developed
We thank him
snake
for his
repellent.
TikTok video, while TikTok still exists.
They'll replace it with YouTube stuff. I don't think they're going to keep TikTok on. They're going to make a deal. There's no way. I don't think. I think it's too bit much of a. Both parties are interested. Hold up. I want to take another look at it. One more. It's paying really.
This chicken shit. Look at that. Bite me. Bite me. This damn snake won't bite me. You know why? Because I got the best moonshine around. This bitch is too scared to bite me. Look at him. Bite me, boy. Bite me.
Oh my god, dude! I feel so bad for that snake. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's real. I think it is. I think it's real. I really want to. I'm sorry for the snake if it is, but I hope that it. Even if it's, I don't know. You're still bothering the poor creature, but it's hilarious. So he's got the best damn
Well,
moonshine. He's developed moonshine snake repellent. If you're a hiker, you just take down. Let's see how much you have to drink for the snake repellent effects to kick in. I'd say maybe about right here is where he noticed the snake repellent effects, and then by the time he got his stream setup going, got logged onto TikTok, he had another couple of shots, so now it's right here. Probably in then 2 more shots, he's gonna be on the floor, and then that's when the snake is gonna bite him.
do you know I've never seen a snake where I am? I've never seen a snake out in the wild here
They're
where I am.
sneaky. They're very sneaky. There's snakes where I am, and there's a lot
Have
of
you
them,
ever
but
seen one?
they're very rare. Yeah, I've caught them before. I've
I've
even
never seen one. Never seen one
my,
in my life out in the wild.
my
So
dad's
weird.
shot them before in the wild. My dad's shot them before. Um, but yeah, they're very sneaky creatures, so you don't see
Sure.
them a lot.
Oh,
But anyway, so that's that. Snake repellent. If you do not live where Nunya lives, if you live somewhere where snakes are a problem, you can get. I mean, I don't know if this works with everybody's moonshine. It might just be you might have to have the best goddamn moonshine around, and that's what like the snakes. And maybe the snake is not biting him out of respect, and the snake is like, I mean, I've had some moonshine in my day, but this is the best goddamn moonshine around. If I bite him right now, this moonshine will be gone to the world forever. So that's the other interpretation. But
well,
okay, is there anything else you want to talk about?
no, I think we're good to go. Looks to be a fun week ahead as Trump goes into inauguration the following week. So I'm sure
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
sure there'll
have a
be lots of
lot to
stories.
talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of stories in the run up leading to it, about his inauguration and what's going to happen and stuff. Um, More of the same. Like, I don't know if you caught some of the footage from the Jimmy Carter funeral,
Mm.
but lots of speculation came out of that yesterday. Trump and Obama were talking and joking around, and there was a lot of speculation around that. And, there was speculation around how Harris and Biden weren't talking to each other. And apparently Michelle Obama never attended. So there was speculation of why she never attended.
Jill Biden
Uh,
mocked Kamala. You saw that? Went kind of viral in front of a room of, I think, press. She was just
what
like,
did he say?
she said something like, I just hope that we come here together for the most important reason, and that is to feel joy. I just hope we feel so much joy right now. And then people start laughing. And then she's like, oh, I think you got all read into that. So the Bidens are, they know that Kamala threw them under the bus. But I mean, Kamala is probably a weak-willed person who was not in a position to stand up to these people, say like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, you're probably caught between a rock and a hard place. But it doesn't change the fact that she screwed over Biden.
Yeah. So I'm sure there will be lots more palace intrigue heading into the inauguration.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see
There's a
what
lot to
happens.
talk about with the Trump administration already. So next time we should probably maybe zero in on that. I think it's going to be an interesting topic to have, interesting subject matter.
It'd
But
be
okay.
interesting, yeah, just to have a chat about the major platforms and where we think Trump is going to go with healthcare, for example,
Yeah.
and foreign policy, education, so on and so forth. Now, I don't know as much about some of the internal domestic stuff, but I can certainly read up on it.
Yeah. Well, I have some opinions about that, so that's definitely something we can talk about. Okay. Well, so that is our episode 11 of Hell in a Handbasket. Thank you very much for watching our video, subscribing, liking, and all that other stuff. Peace.
Cheers, guys.